This is the episode in which we answer your burning questions all about cookbook publishing. Welcome to Everything Cookbooks, the podcast for writers, readers, and cooks. I'm Kate Leahy, and joining me today is the whole gang.
I'm Molly Stevens.
I'm Kristen Donnelly.
I'm Andrea Nguyen.
Welcome, everyone.
Woohoo!
Yay!
This is our final episode of season 9, and we're going to take time to look back at the season we are wrapping up and also answer some listener questions. But first, I kind of wanted just to get into some of our perennially favorite topics on the show. One of them is copy editing. We had a copy editor on the podcast this season.
Yes, we did.
Well, that was a first, right? Because
That was a first.
we kept ranting about how we hate copy editors, and then there was...
Which was not true. We don't
It's
hate
not
them.
true, but you know, they do rankle us late at night.
And Melissa did admit seeking to get them.
Woo!
Molly, tell us a little bit about how that episode came together.
Well, it's funny because it almost did not come together. I don't know where I found Melissa's name, but I was looking, researching, trying to find a copy editor to bring on to talk about it. And I found Melissa, and I learned that she taught an online 6-week class on recipe editing. So I thought she just seemed perfect for the podcast. So I emailed her, and she said she thought it was spam.
Whoa.
She ignored it. And then she went back and realized that, no, it really was us. Anyway, we had her on. Kristen and I had a great conversation with her.
Such a good conversation.
I really loved it.
Sally Akis, friend of the pod, does say it's a must listen. I would agree with that. I think they're all must listens. But also the Substack about it, Melissa gave us 2 PDFs for anybody who's interested in what goes in, doing a self-edit before you submit your manuscript or before you even start your book is actually would be even more helpful, but just incredibly generous. And I think generous is a word that comes to mind when I think about Melissa's approach. Curiosity is the other thing, her ability to bring a beginner's mind to the work. And she makes one point where she says, as an author, you spent 5-6 years on your book. You know it front to back, inside out. And a copy editor gets 3-4 weeks?
Right.
Yeah.
How hard that is to make sense of it all, and how her process of diving in the middle. Anyway, a lot to it.
Andrea, I remember talking to you a while back. It might have been even at an IACP event before COVID, where you were talking about how you wished more people would become copy editors who've specialized in recipes. Because, like Melissa talked about, she has too much work.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking just that because, when I was reviewing, especially the wonderful write-up that you did on the Substack, Molly, and Melissa's documents that she offered, how this notion of recipe editing is not part of the copy editing process enough.
Yeah.
Right.
When I've been asked to go through and take a look at manuscripts after they've been copy edited, because they weren't recipe edited. And I was like, what is a cookbook but recipe?
Right.
Yeah. It is such a specialized skill.
Exactly. And you need to be like a good cook, Not just be able to read recipes, but you need to be a good cook at the same time. So I applaud Melissa for having developed those skills. And I really do wish more copy editors and editors would do so. Because when I'm checking out a new editor for my projects, I'm like, do you cook?
Yeah.
If you don't cook, I'm really not interested.
Yeah. She acknowledged that the rates from publishers are lower than she gets when working with independent people, whether it's creators or otherwise. A lot of the great recipe copy editors I know have kind of moved on because, at least from doing cookbooks with publishers, because the rates are lower. So it sounds like a little bit of a economic issue.
Right.
Right.
So maybe what she's saying is that if you're writing a cookbook and you want it to be totally solid, hire yourself a freelance copy editor that does recipe editing, or hire a recipe editor so that you send it in and you know that it's good.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Something that Melissa said, and Andrea, kind of to your point, she makes a distinction between working with people she calls recipe developers, which for me, real cookbook writers who are cooks. And the distinction is between recipe developers and influencers, basically. She tells a few stories about working with TikTokers. And that just made me think of the whole conversation that we had. Didn't we talk about the Ali Slagle post?
Did we ever talk about that on here?
Actually, we talked about talking about it, but I don't think we did.
So you was like off campus conversation.
We do talk to each other.
We do.
So let's bring that Ali Slagle.
We'll link to it in our show notes too, if people haven't seen it.
It was just an Instagram carousel where she was distinguishing between recipe developer and content creator and talking about the rigor that she brings to her work, which is true, but saying that some content creators don't bring the same level of rigor, which is true. But obviously there's a huge, huge Venn diagram of people who are creators and very careful.
Right.
And it's a funny use of language too, because for me, I've been around a long time. A recipe developer is a very specific skill, and one that I think is, I've done it for clients. I know, you all have done it. I'm often selling the recipe without a byline. It's just simply a service I can provide. I don't think of it as the same as writing a cookbook, but I caught up, and now I know it's being used now to mean a recipe writer who actually develops their own recipes.
Yeah.
For a cookbook that has their name on it. So it's like if you're writing a cookbook with your own byline on it, shouldn't you be developing the recipes yourself?
Yeah,
I know. I had the
funny.
same thing, Molly.
Yeah.
It's like all of a sudden it's like, oh, this is like the new math. This is like the new lingo.
Yeah.
It's so strange.
Look, you have a new item to add to your LinkedIn bio.
I know. Well, I'm sure you've all heard these stories of like, I've been approached, it was maybe like, I don't know, at least 9 years ago to develop, 50 recipes for someone else's cookbook. And they were known for this particular type of food.
I remember that, Kate.
And I thought, like, why should I develop this person's food for them? Aren't they the expert? It was just very weird. And I did not feel comfortable with it.
They have a palate. And why are you like all of a sudden being them without really knowing who they are and being next to them? And they're okay with it.
Cooking is different than recipe development, though. So
Yeah.
for some people, they don't necessarily want to get into the like math of recipe development.
Sure. But they should still have like the ideas and the flavor sensibilities and things rather than like, hey, we just need to fill like 50 recipes. Just
I
like,
see.
Yeah.
Right. Like if they had said, we want a chicken with lemon and chili, can you do that? You're like, cool. But they were just saying,
Batch a bunch of recipes for us.
Got it.
Ghost writing recipes, essentially.
Interesting.
That's called bullshit.
Like maybe that's why Ali Slagle did that post. Maybe it was something, a feeling of that, of people who get a lot of attention maybe for their food, but they're working as the face of a much larger machine that's making food that they're then showing people how to make.
Yeah, it was also to sell her book. I mean, she kind of did it as a, hey, if you want a book of recipes that work really well.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's like drawing the line in the sand between, a content creator who gets a lot of clicks, who will go viral,
Right.
and a recipe developer who is going to put their name and their reputation behind the instructions for people to be better cooks.
Right.
So what is your ambition?
It's such an interesting time.
It was interesting how the comment section on that post, people got excited.
It got spicy.
Yeah. There's a defensiveness around it sometimes. I understand.
Right.
100%. I mean, I said it did remind me a little of the whole like Martha Stewart poo-pooing the bloggers. Who are these bloggers? They're not editors,
Yeah, for me, I'm like, if I had to work with an influencer content creator, I would figure that it's a great opportunity for me to learn. Mm-hmm. And I would hope that whoever that I worked with would figure it would be a great opportunity to learn from me too. So it's called a collaboration. So it can be a win-win situation. It's not an us versus them, zero-sum game.
Right. But it does kind of bring up another point that we've sort of addressed this season. So just these different ways that books are getting out in the world and, who's involved in getting the books out in the world. One thing I did think was interesting is we have talked to people who have gone a different route to get published, either doing Kickstarters, or we talked to Collective Book Studio about doing partnership publishing where there's more, the money is different. And so I do think, like, in thinking about what Melissa's skill set brings in the idea of like people needing more maybe recipe development help, it also seems that going the traditional publishing route, there's also a lot of fracturing going on. What do you think going forward, what cookbook publishing looks like? Say, if you're not maybe somebody with 5 million followers.
I don't know. I really don't know, because publishers have portfolios that they're developing with all different kinds of content. And I think that a large publisher will want to diversify their portfolio. Let's say they have the influencer with the 5 million TikTok followers. That's not guaranteed to sell 5 million books.
Right.
But if you have someone who's skill enable with a solid idea, you can help them develop it into a great book that, has lasting power. So that may be, a little nice flash as a front list, but then it has a long back list potential. And so a smart publisher that wants to stay in business, I think, really balances their portfolio so that there's a little bit of everything, because it's all an investment thing.
Right. Now, that's a good point, that if you just go for one type of book and that type of book falls out of favor. I think we've talked on this podcast before about what happened when there was this boom in blogger cookbooks, maybe is that 15 years ago. And then not all those blog to cookbook publications worked. Some of them did and were very successful. And some, they probably didn't get reprinted. They probably aren't in print anymore. So not all of them work.
Mm-hmm. I guess I've been thinking too more about like the restaurant book. I feel like for so long it was like the restaurant book is dead. And I feel like there have been examples of restaurant books lately that do work well. Like I'm noticing like Lost Kitchen, they have another book coming out. It feels like if somebody creates a space where you want to immerse yourself into that space, or it's like a place a lot of people really want to go, then the books then seem to do well too.
You're right. Like we've been saying, oh, the restaurant book is dead. The restaurant book is dead. And when people say it's dead, it's probably the time to start revisiting that.
Totally.
Right.
Hillary Sperling came out with a matzah this summer. Yes, she's a chef within the Danny Meyer restaurant world, but the book is very personal. And it's not all the recipes that she cooks at her restaurant in New York City. She takes these tangents through her life. So it is a restaurant book in a way. There are some recipes, but not in the way that we've seen before.
Don't you think that the reason why the restaurant chef books were dead, or that they weren't accessible and useful to enough people
Absolutely.
To make enough money?
Yep.
If you're going to be writing these books that are essentially tchotchkes for people who come to your restaurant and to replicate, potentially, aspirationally replicate the tweezer dish or what, how many copies are you going to sell to make it worthwhile for a publisher?
Yeah.
But if you were to do something that was accessible and fresh to home cooks and broaden your audience beyond the folks who come to your restaurant or who know you as a chef, now that is something that is potentially practical.
Right.
I think it's going to continue to get harder for first-time authors to get a book deal. I think it's going to be harder to find an agent and to break in. And that's why we're seeing the rise of different publishing models. It's a very crowded market, but there are, on the other hand, some of the stuff we're seeing is like super creative. With a few of the people we've spoken to this past season, Ella Quittner with Obsessed with the Best, Tanya Bush's memoir cookbook, the comic book cookbook. I think we're seeing some really creative things happening, but just sort of standard run-of-the-mill, not interesting book is probably going to be a tough sell.
Yeah, actually books where writing quality is a big part of them, like seeing more and more of those, to me, that's exciting.
And I think visually there can be a lot done with cookbooks now more than ever to break out of the typical layout and design. We touched on that with Alison Roman, but certainly with comic cookbooks, there's like a whole new world.
Whole new world and a whole new audience.
Yeah, completely. I mean, that's the other thing is that we need to remember that cookbook publishing, it's such a funny little space.
Right?
Yeah, such a funny little space.
And it's so funny, like if I'm at the doctor's and they say, "Oh, what do you do?" And I mention the podcast and like, "Oh my gosh, I love cooking." And then you start talking to them, you realize they know maybe 2 books. I mean, we're so deep into it, and there are so many different audiences out there for these books, for books in general. It's popular, but is it deep?
Yes. Right. I love that the books that are crossing genre, like say memoir/cookbook in Tanya Bush's Will This Make You Happy, or in Sarah Beacon's, comic book cookbooks. I mean, if you want to make ramen and you're a 12-year-old and you love graphic novels, you're going to pick up her Let's Make Ramen cookbook because it resembles a way that you like to digest information. And that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, for sure.
Speaking of voice, we did also talk to Kathy Guns. I think she's going to have to do more of these retreats because people want to work with her and work on their voice in beautiful places like Maine. But there were some specific things she talked about there about like protecting your voice and also avoiding burnout. And I think burnout's also a perennial topic within within the culture these days. Everyone's talking about avoiding burnout, or I have burnout, or I'm getting over burnout.
We had an episode on burnout.
We did. It's still one of our most popular episodes of all time. And I don't know if that's a good thing that we're providing comfort or if it's a bad thing because people keep listening to it. And I think it's like at least a year or 2 old now.
Publicly admitting your weakness
People love
is
it.
something I have no shame about.
So if you missed some of those episodes, go back and listen. They're always available for you. Our whole backlist is available for free. It's a great resource if you're just dipping your toes into cookbook publishing.
But if you want to support the show,
Keep the lights on.
we have ways to do that too.
Molly writes a lovely Substack, and it's also filled with even more in-depth information that kind of complements what we talk about on the show. Yeah, we didn't even go into blurbs, but that episode, definitely if you missed that one, it's a fun one. Let's go on to some listener questions.
Let's go for it.
Okay, so listener question number 1. How do you make sure recipes from the same dish are sufficiently different from each cookbook? And I think we can answer this in 2 ways. I'm wondering if the person who asked the question means if you have a recipe for, say, chocolate chip cookies, are you trying to make it different from other chocolate chip cookie recipes? Or is the question, you have a cookbook with a chocolate chip cookie recipe, you have a second cookbook, the chocolate chip cookie recipe has to be in there. Do you have to change it? So I think we can answer this question in 2 ways.
Or you've written a single subject cookbook, and I think this is something Andrea can talk to, and you have a book on banh mi. How do you make each recipe distinct enough to warrant having so many different recipes?
But then if you want to put banh mi in another cookbook.
Exactly.
Can you plagiarize yourself? Yeah.
Or you have 2 pho recipes in your first book, and people say, now write a pho book. And you're like, what do you have to say about pho?
Yeah. So what did you do in that situation?
In a situation like that, or let's actually take something even more simple, nuoc chấm, the dipping sauce. Every Vietnamese cookbook I have has a nuoc chấm recipe. So every single time I go to write a Vietnamese book, I'm like, what the heck do you have to say about this thing now?
Because it's only like 4 or 5 ingredients depending on how you make it, right?
But then I think about what people want. In Vietnamese Food Any Day, I came up with a recipe for how to make it so that you can have a shelf-stable version that's more like a restaurant version that you can just like pull out of the fridge, add a little bit of lime juice, and then you're done. And that's what restaurants do. So I realized when I got to that book that the recipe that I had had for so many years was just like this thing for like home cooks that I was like stuck to. I was so stuck in my ways. And then I was really like having to push myself to like, how can you make this easier for someone? And so in that book, I like tweaked the recipe so that it could be made with vinegar and then just a little bit of citrus acid. And by the time I got to Evergreen Vietnamese, it was like, how do I make it vegan and like really good? So I came up with a vegan fish sauce that you make at home and a bunch of different variations. So it's like, I think about this if you had to write a dashi recipe, it's like 3 ingredients. What are you going to say?
What are you going to do?
But your audience expects that same recipe because they need it right there and then in that book.
Yeah. That's where cookbooks become really about curation.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like there are times when it makes sense to repeat a recipe in a book for things like those staples, unless it then makes sense to vary it to fit that particular book's theme. I'm thinking about Sarah Kiefer's, one of the books where she did the pan banging chocolate chip cookie that went viral. I feel like it was like 100 baked goods and then maybe 100 cookies. And so I think in 100 cookies, there's a full chapter on pan banging cookies. I can't remember if it includes the original cookie as well as the variations. It might not, but that's another way people sometimes will do it.
But don't you think that like these classic iconic dishes, that there are like ways where you're just like, I can do it different. I can do it better because you're a different cook as you mature.
Oh, absolutely.
And ingredients change, what's available changes. Okay, say I have a recipe that I love from a cookbook that's been out for, say, 5 years, and I'm making my own cookbook. I'm inspired by this recipe, but I'm going to make it mine. So what do I do in that case? I really feel like it needs to be in my cookbook because it's important to me. It fits my theme. However, it's not fully my creation, but I'm tweaking it to make it mine. So what do I do in that case? Like Molly, for one of your braising recipes, if somebody like took one of your recipes and was inspired but made it with their own seasonings, what would you feel comfortable with them doing in, like, say, a head note or in the recipe itself?
I'm only smiling because you see it all the time. It's like, oh, it's kind of my recipe, but it depends how closely you follow it. It depends how long you've been making it on your own without the recipe. I think if you truly adapted this recipe into your daily routines and you've made it your own, you probably don't have to say, I started making this based on so-and-so's recipe. We've talked a lot about attribution on this podcast, and Kristen, I know you've thought you've over-attributed sometimes, but I'm a big fan of saying this is inspired by Richard Olney recipe or whatever, if that's helpful. So I think part of what I want to say to this listener is if you're changing something just to change it, that to me is a red flag. Like if you're changing it because you've evolved as a cook and you now make it this way, you've added this flourish or taken away. That's what I've done. My own evolution. I take away now. So I'm like, why capers and parsley and lemon? How about just one of those, So change just to change it so you can call it yours doesn't feel authentic. In that case, then you should say this is inspired by an Andrew Nguyen recipe or something.
Yeah, like if you were just to go from like kosher salt to fine sea salt.
For example.
Not enough creativity there.
Yeah.
Nope. I think we've given this question asker a lot of things to think about, and hopefully our audience a lot of things to think about. So let's get into question number 2. This is one that I'm sure our friend Sally Eckes would have a lot to say, and we're going to reference her probably in our answer. But the question is it ever okay to connect with agents before your proposal is ready to share?
I know what Sally will say.
It depends.
Yes.
Depends. Okay, why would it depend, Kristen?
I think if you're somebody who it's like super clear that you're ready for a cookbook, whether, you're somebody who's like has a zillion social media followers and like you're ready for a book, but you're trying to figure out your angle maybe, or let's say like you wrote an article that went viral and you're thinking about a book based on that article. I think that there are times when it can be appropriate to reach out to an agent you admire to see if they would be willing to talk to you, see if they'd be willing to help guide the process. A lot of times they won't sign you until the proposal is done. But some of them, when they agree that there's like really something there, they are definitely willing to talk. But if you don't have that kind of momentum and you just want somebody to like bounce ideas around with, I would not reach out to agents in advance.
Phone a friend.
Yeah, phone a friend.
Phone a friend. Activate your lifelines. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. How do you feel about that?
That's very astute, Kristen, because that's what I would suggest too. It's like, even you have like a proposalette, a one-pager.
Yeah.
You need to talk about something. And even if you just want to bounce off ideas, sketch something out that fits one page, type it up. so that you can talk to an agent about it and help them suss out whether or not it's a feasible project and what you can do to really flesh it out and make it sellable and successful.
100%.
I think the Collective Book Studio episode, Angela spoke about getting an agent's attention and whether they'll be willing to speak with you for free, basically. And I would just be very aware that this person, it's their time. They get paid for their time and their expertise. And you can't expect an agent to just be like, oh, let me think about that. You're interested in writing a cookbook someday.
This is going to sound terrible, but it's basically like become aware of how valuable the conversation might be for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, like it's valuable for you to reach out to an agent if you're like suddenly become this like hot commodity. Again, like some essay hits a nerve and you're like, oh, this is a book. Or
Say a publisher reaches out saying, hey, we're interested.
yeah, like sometimes publishers reach out, but they won't necessarily sign you until there's a proposal, but maybe they do some, loose work with you and then you need to find an agent after that.
You know what my trigger is when someone would say, I want to talk to you to pick your brain.
Yeah.
That's why we have this podcast.
First of all, like that just sounds really awful. I don't want anyone to pick my brain. I mean, it's just like I've got images of something, a biological like yuckiness that they'll find.
That's your idiom thing, Andrew.
Yeah. Don't pick my brain. Don't ask to pick my brain.
Picture like a guitar pick.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Oh, stop.
I'm thinking
Stop.
like a seafood,
Okay.
since it's just the four of us today. Don't think of it as that kind of session. Think of it as a business conversation that's going to lead to something. And Kristen, what you're saying is like, have empathy for
Yeah.
the person on the other side. This is their living.
Also, professionalism, you could burn a bridge, I think, if you, not burn a bridge, but first impressions do count. So
Yeah.
you could attend a pitch fest.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Here's where I think you can reach out to an agent when you don't have a proposal and you're maybe not ready to pitch your book. You can follow them if they have a Substack. I know Sally Eckes has a Substack. Other agents also have Substacks. They have Instagram. You can follow them there. You can comment when something is pertinent to whatever you're working on. And maybe just by the act of doing that, you get a little name recognition with that agent without being a pest. I'm not talking about DMs. I'm talking about just comments in a public forum. There's no harm in doing that. And I think I would recommend that if you are trying to just make more connections in the publishing world. But what you don't want to do is email them saying, hey, I have this great idea for a book about chocolate chip cookies and I want to pick your brain and would you consider working with me? Because an agent's going to see that and think, oh, this person hasn't done their homework. That could be like 6 months of unfree labor trying to get this person up to speed, teaching them about publishing, teaching them how to write a proposal. And then, well, that also might be a hard book to sell. So I'm not even guaranteed I'd sell it and get my 15%, which would maybe reimburse me for my time. So those are probably what would be going through an agent's head. But you can be a kind person on the internet and boost, say an agent has a new book announcement and you can like it and you can comment saying how excited you are that XYZ topic is becoming a book.
Totally. Being a good professional citizen.
Exactly.
Yeah, literary citizen. Yes.
A
yes.
colleague of sort.
Exactly. No picking of the brain.
No picky.
Okay, so this other question's a little longer. I've condensed it to make it a little bit more universal for listeners. So the original question was about baking, but I think this would apply to other kinds of recipes. Here it is. What do you do if there are essential recipes that a baking book should have, but like there's minor differences in your recipes? Say you take a chew paste, but you keep the ratio the same between the eggs and everything else, but then you play with the flavors and ingredients. Do you have to give credit to someone for the base recipe? We kind of already answered this question, but I'm curious to know what you're thinking. If it's, say, maybe it's even simpler than chew paste, it's a pie crust.
Pie crust, yeah.
Pasta, homemade pasta, basic formulas.
Yeah. Ratios. They're universal ratios for things.
And who are you going to give credit to? Because
Yeah, that's true. That's actually a good way to maybe ask yourself, like, if you can't even trace back the original source.
Yeah, that is a great way to think of it. Because sometimes there are like certain combinations or techniques where somebody becomes super well known for it. But
like open up like 3 or 4 cookbooks that you like, baking books, and take a look at their ratios and their techniques. Right. They're all kind of similar. And so what can you bring to the table that's going to change things up?
Makes sense.
Language, voice, procedure, write it in a way that is the way you speak, teach, write.
To your people.
Yeah.
Yes. This listener also has a follow-up question. Say you have a blog and you want to put 75% of your recipes in your cookbook that have already been published on your blog. So maybe 25% of your recipes will be new recipes for your book. 75% have already been on the internet in some form published. Can you do that, number one? And if you do want to do that, do you have to change some things so they're different, so they're unique to print, so people can't just get them for free online? Big question.
Who's publishing this?
I was going to say, if you're self-publishing, I think you can do whatever
fine.
you want.
Yeah. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah. It really depends.
I mean, I know in my last book contract, it said in the contract that, I don't know if there was a percentage, but, I had to say that these recipes were not available elsewhere.
Yeah. If you're going with a traditional publisher, they will usually give you a percentage that has to be original. Sometimes it can be as much as 90%. I've heard of people even saying 50%, some publishers. Again, like the way you write it on the blog might be different from the way you do it in the book. You might, when you go back to retest something, you might be like, actually, I like this better, or I'll do this version. So it doesn't always have to be like totally unique things. Like you can start with something that exists and evolve it for your book for sure. And that counts as an original recipe from a publisher point of view a lot of times.
I also think back to the copy editing conversation, because if you're writing for a blog, I mean, maybe your blog and your book are seamless voice and style wise, but usually they're not. Usually there's some differences. And so you're going back and you're making it again, you're testing it again, you're rewriting it. So it becomes different in that evolution.
Yeah, it's a very natural process where the recipe is going to change and other people are going to have their input, like the copy editor and your editor, and then design. You're like tweaking things in design. I was thinking of Maurizio Leo's sourdough bread book called The Perfect Loaf. He has this extremely popular bread baking blog, and certain recipes are from the blog that were published in the book, but they're like a different format. I was like, no big deal. And also I have it all now in one place.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So it depends on your followers and, your topic. And if your people are down with that, then a sale's a sale. So go for it,
I'd say where you probably want to proceed with caution is if you only have, say, 100 recipes and you have 75 on your website and 25 are new, and you want to go out and shop that 100 recipes to a traditional publisher in North America. That will be a challenge. And it'll be a challenge for the reasons I think Molly and Kristen, you've talked about. Like they're going to want some unique content. I do think, Andrea, to your point, though, there's so many examples, great examples of when recipes, how they shift and have to morph when you put them on a printed page, and how, depending on how you read recipes, that might just capture a whole different audience than, say, scrolling on their phone to get recipes. Hey, I wonder what the New York Times does. Clearly, their cookbooks, everything's been published on their platform.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
And then they're publishing these books that just introduce the recipes.
For some people, like that is valuable, even just to have it all in a package, again, because books are curation. And it's definitely a different experience cooking from a book than cooking from your phone or a printout or whatever.
Yeah, I think a great episode addresses this is we spoke with Sang Dundara, and he's a content creator. He's all over YouTube, TikTok, and he talked about how these recipes are very much, he lives them. He cooks them all the time. So even though they're still available on his YouTube or his TikTok, the ones that are in his book are new because he's grown with them. So it's a great way to think about it, I thought.
And a great episode to listen to, just thinking about, oh, he was contacted, I think, by 10 Speed first. Then he got linked with his agent, who was Sally, I believe. He also, speaking of new ways to get visuals into books, he learned how to be a food photographer.
Crazy.
That episode just packed with like, wow, that was a lot of do-it-yourself spirit in it, even though it was with a traditional publishing house. So good episode callback. So we have one more question. This one is totally different topic. The listener is planning their first ever cookbook tour, which, hooray, how exciting.
Yay.
And they're wondering about the protocols on where and how to sign books. They were once told they should sign on the title page and not on the flyleaf, which is like the blank page next to the end papers. Is one better than the other? Also, should they come up with a signature phrase to write in addition to their name?
Such a
and
cute
finally,
question.
what do
that's
we
cute.
think about using a Sharpie versus another marker or special pen? All of these are great questions.
I love it.
I love this one.
Andrea, what do you think?
You can ask the bookseller. Also, it depends. Think about how you sign your books. Were you just like a signature person, or did you write long notes? Do you want to actually, inscribe the book to someone? What's your handwriting like? Do you write big or do you write small? And practice on a sheet of paper and see how it fits. And I am so into Sharpies, color Sharpies. In fact, for Evergreen Vietnamese, I bought a whole box of green Sharpies that I took to signings with me because I'm like, I want it to stand out. And Sharpies come in like gold and silver and all that, but make sure to test it out first to make sure that the color pops when you sign that book.
Well, and also the paper. I remember I was not a Sharpie person for a very long time. I thought it needed to be ink pen, ballpoint. And then my roasting book was on the really high gloss paper and it had to be a Sharpie or it just didn't work.
Bleeds. It doesn't dry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like Sharpie's the gold standard. But I guess if you have an uncoated paper that will absorb the ink, you can go with something else.
But it is fun to have a pen. Like someone gifted me a pen once for signing. It was really nice. But I'm a big title page person because I'm just old school. But I have had people come back and say, you didn't sign my book because they opened to the fly leaf and it's not there.
Oh.
But I like the title page, again, old school, because I sign above my name. And then I also learned if it's someone who you're close with, you cross out your last name. Do you ever hear this?
No.
Like if I just sign Molly instead of Molly Stevens, I'll cross out the Stevens. So I'll do Molly and then the Y will slash through the last name.
Really? That's some flourish.
Super old school.
I've never heard that. I love that tidbit though. Wow.
I don't know where I got it. Some New York publishing.
Do you have a catchphrase that you would put on your books?
I always said happy potlucking.
That's a good one.
That's good. For braising, I say braise on.
Like it?
I've written Bon Appetit for my banh mi book.
Nice.
That's good. That's good. We're here for a pun. It's so smart that this listener is asking this question in advance, because if you have to think on the spot of some sort of like catchphrase, you freeze up and then you just go like, cheers, which is nothing wrong with saying that, but it's like, it's smart to like think this through.
There's nothing wrong with just signing your name too. It's just
Exactly.
That's true.
Practicing is really great because there's a terrible thing that happens if you screw up and someone has bought the book and it happens, your hand goes or you write something. I always say if it's a proper signing where I have a sheet of paper and I say, what's your name? How do you spell it? Even if it's Bob, like seriously. And I write it down. Not if it's Bob, but I will write it down if it's all questionable because you don't want to screw up.
Yeah. And then, they can, if the store has like someone helping you with the signing, they oftentimes have the person write their name on a Post-it or something and attach it to the book.
Super
and that's
helpful.
very helpful because you're just copying. Because oftentimes they're talking to you while you sign.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, I can't do things. I suck at multitasking. But I'm also trying to be polite. And they're sometimes telling me these, stories that just could bring me to tears or something.
Sure.
And so I'm like, and I'm about to misspell your name.
Right. Have you ever had the experience where someone asks you to sign and write something that
In a
is
foreign
not-
language.
Oh, I haven't had that, but I've had, could you write to Michelle, thank you for taking my family on the trip or something? I'm like, I've had weirder things than that. And I was like, I think that's a no, you right.
I don't know you.
Yeah, anyway.
That's funny.
That is funny. Yeah, if you're at a bookstore and if the bookseller is kind enough to open up the page that they want your signature to be on, then you don't even have to worry. You're like, oh, and it's usually the title page. But sometimes, depending on the design, maybe it's easier on a different page. But yeah, I agree, Molly. Just default with the title page. Take out that variable.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah. Oh, these were great. Yeah, I was thinking like Dory Greenspan. I think she has like a special like calligraphy pen that she uses, and her signatures always look very specific, kind of like what's already in her book because she has her signature printed in.
And she does XOX. Jacques is happy cooking. I mean, there's certain ones we know.
Yeah.
Julia was, of course, Bon Appetit, but you can come up with your own or just sign your name.
And if you do, just, take a picture of your book and tag us on Instagram and
I love it.
We'll reshare.
Be caffeinated to sign books. Don't drink too much and make alcohol beforehand.
Caffeinate, not alcohol.
Yeah.
Yep. That's also pro tip. Well, thank you, everybody. These were great. This was a great conversation. This was fun.
Thank you. This is awesome.
Thank you for all the listeners to send us great questions.
Absolutely. Coming up, we'll be airing some older episodes that we still think are really great listens. We do have a little tidbit if you are an IACP member or are just interested. I will be doing an IACP talk with our great editor, Abby Cirquitella, and we're going to tell you about like the ins and outs of podcasting, how we got our start, how Abby and I started working together with the team. I'm going to ask Abby all the nitty gritty questions about this, probably the stuff that I do that drives her nuts, and she has been too polite to tell me. It's going to be August 19th. If you're not a member of IACP, you can still join into the talk. I think you just have to pay a nominal ticket fee. That's August 19th. Tune in if you're curious about what goes on behind the scenes at Everything Cookbooks. And if you have topics that you want us to do an episode on, just as a group, anything that's in our wheelhouse, get in touch. Thanks, everyone. This was so fun.
Thank you, Kate.
Thanks, Kate.
Happy summer.
Thank you for listening to Everything Cookbooks. For more about each episode, subscribe to our newsletter at everythingcookbooks.substack.com. Here are other ways to support the show. Go to everythingcookbooks.com and check out our totes, t-shirts, sweatshirts, and other merch. You can also buy us a round of coffee. You can also leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Thanks as always to our editor, Abby Cirquitella. And until next time, keep on writing, reading, and cooking.